I'm Ayesha Erotica. I'm 13 years old and I'm a porn star. My television show Smoking Hot comes out May 28th, 2016. Make sure to watch it.
I reject the idea that gender is social and sex is biological. I reject that idea. I think that's a stupid idea. Because we have decided what characteristics constitute sex, right? So, wanting to... God. This is a big fucking question.
To get told what to do. You get ready to get told how to do it and who to do it with. So, you little inferior little boy, tiny little man. That's how you should feel when you're looking at me. When you're looking at me, you should feel like a tiny little man. I don't need a cap anymore. Don't need anything. All I need is my fucking top and my poppers and my trunks. I've got some sexy fucking trunks on, but you're not. Oh yeah, join me. Keep fucking joining me. Keep it going, keep it going, keep it going, keep it going.
He had to convert back when that became illegal. First jump very critical because you want to get a score on the board. There he goes down the runway. Mexican's not too happy with the American athletes during these games.
Sigourney, we're sitting here having a little girl talk about your husband, Jim Simpson, and mentioning your new hairdo. And I have to congratulate you on your performance. I thought, you were fantastic in Alien, but my gosh, this is even more fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much.
Wonderful performance.
Thank you very much.
It was Anita Hill's responsibility to deal with that on the spot. I do not feel she was the victim of sexual harassment. I feel she was made uncomfortable by sexual language. Quid pro quo, if there had been, if he had laid a hand on her and so on. I support sexual harassment guidelines. I think it's a wonderful innovation of contemporary feminism. But I think the hostile workplace category is really going overboard. I think that I'm radical on the subject of free speech. Fight back by speech. We must make middle-class women able to use aggressive speech against their assailants. I do not believe there should be any policing of speech per se. So I think that Clarence Thomas merely talking about pornography, to me that was welcome. I am radically pro-pornography. I'm delighted he talked about pornography.
You're radically pro-pornography only in the concept that you think that everybody ought to have an opportunity to express whatever they want to express.
See, like my father, who taught at a religious college, would not have tolerated bawdy talk. He would have gotten up from a table and my father would have given up a job rather than to put up with it. So I don't think it's a feminist issue. Went along to get along, and her long-standing friendship with Clarence Thomas shows the fact that, in point of fact, she was not that upset by it. She was distressed at the time, but it didn't make any deep change in her life.
But even though she says differently.
Yeah, she's 10 years later.
Conflict between the identity politics activists and the postmodernists. Why does everyone think that identity politics is postmodern? There's nothing postmodern about it.
So sex is socially constructed, right? It's not biological. Like there are biological components to sex. Outside of like a medical setting, what makes it a worthwhile category? Because we choose which biological aspects constitute sex. What makes it so radically different from gender? Is gender what's performed? Is gender performed? And why was there so much sex talk in that last section? It feels like whenever anyone's talking about like gender and sex, they want to talk about actual sex. Why does sex always get involved?
Gender is a complex tapestry woven from biology, culture, and personal identity, traditionally viewed as binary, male or female. Philosophers like Judith Butler challenge these norms by arguing that gender is performative. It's not simply something we are, but something we do. This notion opens up conversations about transgender rights and non-binary identities, highlighting that everyone deserves recognition. The exploration of gender also intersects with ethics. How should society respond to those who break traditional molds? Questions arise about The exploration of gender also intersects with ethics. How should society respond to those who break traditional molds? Questions arise about...
The first thing you need to know about gender is that it's not the same as sex. Sex comes from biology, although that does not mean that it's a binary or clearly understood. One of the most famous theories of gender, and where it comes from, is Judith Butler's gender performativism. You may have heard of it. It's the idea that gender is something we perform.
Hi everyone, and thank you for being here for this lecture. Judith Butler talks to us that gender can be a cultural phantasm, and phantasm is defined as an elusive, imagined threat to what culture knows to be true. And that imagined threat, that feeling of uncertainty, anxiety that can result in fear and angry responses, is to this idea of what the lived experience of gender should be to dominant culture and those
wrong, no, that's wrong. What she said was wrong, completely wrong. Judith Butler says that I watched like a few YouTube videos. I know what I'm talking about. Judith Butler defines the phantasm as like a state of being. A phantasm is like a prism. You know, there's reality exists, and it goes into the prism, and the prism refracts it out. Oh God. Okay. Example. Okay. Transgender people.
There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, if men really can't become women, as they cannot, then it's false for everybody too. And if it's false, then we should not indulge it, especially since that indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology. Transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely.
So you have these conservative people that are like presented with something that disrupts their understanding of gender, right? It disrupts it. So the phantasm refracts the reality, the truth of transgenderism, like the truth of trans people and how they exist, and refracts it into like a malicious something. It basically, like, the existence of trans people cause anxiety within the person who is trapped inside of the phantasm, okay? And because of that, the phantasm acts as like a form of repression, sort of. And the repression turns the existence of trans people into transgender ideology. It turns them into something different in the mind of the person encased in the phantasm, so that it can assuage their anxieties and cause her to be a new threat. I don't think I'm explaining it right.
We invited Professors Berlant and Stewart tonight.
Attachment, therefore, is a psychoanalytic concept related to unconscious or unwilled fantasy investment, an affective concept tracking attachments to situations exemplifying forms of life, a concern of ideology critique by way of the selling of normativity, and a phenomenal practice of being an object thrown into the world with other objects. To politicize attachment requires attending to and proposing continuities among multiple subjectivities, thinking that they're organized in relation to the same object, scene, or problem, even if the object, scene, or problem that we think is collectively organizing us is really a magnet for heterogeneous forces and fantasies.
Being a woman is so nuanced and complex.
A number of people warned me against writing a book about boys and men. Men are still being held to an old standard of what it meant to be a successful father in a world where that is neither possible for many of them, or even desirable.
What does the modern man look like, and what does society expect of him?
The modern man looks confused because they no longer knew exactly what their place was in the world, in a really personal sense.
Okay, so I have made a video. I have trashed through the internet and philosophy, and I would now like to articulate my thoughts on gender. People need to orient themselves around a social construct. They need to orient themselves around an agreed-upon subjective sense of objectivity, the belief that something is real. To most people, gender is the very first social contract that feels entirely real. I'm not talking about sex here. I started off the video discussing sex, but to me, outside of medical contexts, sex isn't that interesting or necessary to everyone's day-to-day life. Society is changing very rapidly, and the gendered roles need to change as well. Unfortunately, society itself has changed faster than the social expectations of gender. I want to take that sentence back. Unfortunately, society itself has changed faster than the societal expectations placed onto gendered bodies. Social expectations of what characterizes gender have never However, people desperately want and need to grasp onto their perceived gendered experience in order to maintain the assuredness of the legitimacy of gendered existence. Those most frightened of this disillusionment of gender have receded to the maintenance that their sex must be real. Male and female binaries are what constitute reality. You see this in the manosphere of the menfluencers. Men trying to be ultra-masculine and strong, and you also see this with the rise of TERFs, or trans-exclusionary radical feminists, in their bigotry towards transgender people, particularly trans women. They polarize male and female to deal with changing approaches to gender. I don't think that we can abolish gender, or do any of those things that anarcho-socialist Twitter wants us to do, but I also don't think we should reinstate these old and outdated norms surrounding gender. What we need... Someone there? Hello? What we need are new norms. We need new gendered role models. We need new gendered archetypes. I'm not certain how possible that is because it took all of humanity to create the ones we have now. Gender is more than a set of behaviors and fashion. It's a way of situating yourself in the world. Reality is scary, and everyone needs something that's a little bit fake in order to make sense of the real. We need to keep gender, but we need a new understanding of gender. Gender needs to change. However, there is one thing that I don't know how to explain. I feel like a man. Like, I know I'm a man. Trans women know that they are women, even though they have the lived experience of a man. Like, I didn't just read all of this theory online and now I've deconstructed gender and I suddenly feel non-binary. That's not how gender works. So there seems to be an intuitive aspect to gender, something that kind of lives in our subconscious that does exist outside of social norms. So to say that gender is entirely constructed, that's just not right.